Hi, it was making it a little difficult for me to go live, but hey, whatever. I'm still pretty new at this. Not a worry, not a big worry. Anyway, hi there. Jeremiah Bork here. My phone trying to alert me while it's operating up my webcam. So anyway, I'm Jeremiah Bork. I'm the English tutor, former Japanese translator, former-ish, behind Friendly Phrases, the YouTube channel here, and I'm trying to tutor English to the world, basically. And I realize that this is going to fail 50 times before it actually works once. But I just have to do it anyway. I just have to start the process and make it happen. And that's because that I don't think that there's any easy, simple way to do it. I've tried YouTube videos, I've tried outreach. It's just, if people don't know me, if people have no idea who I am, they're not going to actually put any trust in me. So, and besides, I've come to see the whole video process as a little inauthentic, and that's because anything that lets you take 5, 10 takes to do it, or more, however many it takes, it's easy to trip over words. But the point is that English is a process, and mistakes are part of that process. And even though that I'm very much a fluent English native, that's not the point. I'm always going to make mistakes. And the point is to go back over those mistakes and to show other people how I'm going over those mistakes because that'll help them. And therefore, I want to just present myself to the world as somebody who's not perfect, but who is helpful. That's the point of friendly phrases. And I was shocked that the name was not taken, so I took it a few months ago, and here we are. So, so let me see what this isn't perfect either. The idea is simply to take all sorts of English content and to run with it. And what I'll do here at the start here, uh, okay, this was a conversation that I had a few days ago. This was the second conversation with this fellow, and I don't know anything about his real identity or anything. This is just somebody I came to encounter over the internet and saw me through some sort of English hub, Discord, because I don't have my own or anything yet. So anyway, a Ukrainian, and he had asked me to help him with homework. And generally, I'm not like I'm literally of helping people with their homework if they're doing it for scores. Uh, just because the idea is to help people learn. It's not to help people test well. It's to help people learn, and then they'll test well, hopefully. But it was a teachable moment, and I took the opportunity to do what I could. Now, he came back a second time and had a different situation. I'll run through the sorts of questions that he had, first of all. And like I said, I don't even know his real name, so I can't give it to you anyway, and it doesn't matter. The point is that these are very ordinary situations. Ordinary situations, and I'm just staring at myself, and I don't think that this is like 60 frames, but I'm not sure it should be. I'm not going to worry about it at first because everything is going to get changed and improved as I go. Anyway, so these were the sorts of questions that he had. And this was about the correct form of the possessive case for singular or plural. Number one, Steve has two brothers. Mother said Steve is not allowed to take his brother toys without asking. 2. The zookeeper did his round and put food in all the animal cages. 3. The first day of summer holidays is the school child favorite day of the year. 4. Hannah has lots of friends. Two of them have their birthday on the same day. Hannah is buying a dress for her friend joint birthday party. 5. Sorry for 2-hour delay. So I looked at this and I was like, these are 5 of 15, but I was like, he's going to get these 5 wrong. I just in my head already thought of it that he was going to get these wrong. And that's exactly how it went. I feel like the quiz, excuse me, that was designed so that the first five questions were things that an average person coming as a foreign learner would absolutely for sure get wrong. The next two were maybes, and the last eight were easy, and any person even remotely familiar with the language would get right. And that's why I considered it a powerful teachable moment, so to speak, just because that you see things like this, people get them wrong on the internet all the time, and they don't bother to correct it, and nobody bothers to correct them. And I have a lot of hesitation towards correcting somebody who's just posting on Facebook or something like that. Anybody can make a typo. Anybody can, not be a grammar expert. That's not the point. But let me just walk you through this as an example. The first one, and I'll do it in reverse order just so that I come back to it. Mother said Steve is not allowed to take his brother toys without asking. But it says in the first place, Steve has two brothers. One, two. So let me put up a new text thing so I type this up here. Text. Let's see if I can get the font the way I want better. Extra bold will do. Okay. This is how it's supposed to be. Play here. Here will do. Yeah, yeah, don't mess with that. That's not what I want. Shut. Here we go. Shut. I'm gonna put this back here. No, I'm just trying to organize my thing because it's trying to put a YouTube chat, but it doesn't want to play nice. Uh, okay. Now you'll play nice. Okay. Where are you gonna put this? I guess I'll put it up here. Okay, brothers, plural. So the point here being that brothers has to be plural because there's two of them. One, two. But then you have an apostrophe in it. And the instinct of a normal person is to put something like that. That's the instinct that people get learning the language. But it's really like this. And it's like this because it's two of them, but it's possessive to both of them. Both the brothers' toys that Steve is not allowed to touch. So, three brothers, Steve is one of them. He's not allowed to touch the toys of the two others. So, that's what I mean about it's not instinctive for somebody to get this right the first time. But it's the sort of thing that if you can get right, that it really helps your English in the long run, which is very important. So the next one, the zookeeper did his round and put food in all the animals' cages. Now here we have Kate. So I'm just putting up here cages plural because just that tells you that it's more than one animal. Therefore, it's a similar case. Even though that a lot of people that they're just not really used to writing like this, and then the apostrophe. Because, and like I said, people just aren't used to doing that. If they learn the first way to do it, that's the first thing that they learn about how to use the apostrophes for possessive cases. And it gets more complicated when you have plural possessives. So the first day of the summer holidays is the school child. Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, this is did they get this wrong? I forget. It's not important. I'll go over it anyway. So you have one child, but it's not. This is children in general. Because children in general find the first day of the summer holidays the favorite day of the year. So it is once again because it's children in general, and then we put an apostrophe to show it's possessive, not just to one, not just to two, not just to three. All these children's favorite day. So it's not specific to one particular individual. It's specific, but not, individual. It's general. It's group. So we have that, and we can take that off. So the fourth one was what here? Hannah, yes. Hannah has lots of friends, important to indicate. Two of them have their birthday on the same day. Hannah is buying a dress for her friend's joint birthday party. So we start with friends, multiple, and I'll put this. So yeah, Hannah has lots of friends. They say that up front, and they expect you to remember it, and then you completely forget a second later. So that's how it works. That's how people get you with these questions. So friends, because it's more than one, but they are both having a joint birthday party. And that's why it's friends like this. And like I said, I knew that these were the ones likely that the person would get wrong just because they're not the natural ones. And the fifth one is a funny one because, yeah, uh, let's say, can I get it all? It's barely. Let's, okay. Sorry for 2 hour delay. Most people would not say it like this at all. Because we put it for like, if we put the in front of it, then you see here that it's completely different. If you have the, then 2 hour is a noun. And you can, of course, write it with, you know, you can put it like that, but that's not the point. But here, the way that it was specifically written, which like I said, it was unusual from my perspective. What was this again? Even I had to look it up at the time. It's like 2 hours there. Yeah, that is the one. I had to look it up because it's unusual enough. Even I had to put it through Google in order to be absolutely sure. So yeah, so you see that it's possessive because the delay belongs to the 2 hours, which are a plural of hours. But if you put it as, if you have a hyphen, then it's treated as a single thing. But because that there is no hyphen, it's missing, then it's 2 hours as if we're counting the individual hours, one, two. So that's why that's, like I said, I expected this group of questions to be easy to get wrong, and that's exactly what happened. Now, the next one was, it was decided by the city council. And this is a trick question, and it was an issue of if the person would notice the trick, basically. Because with all these things that you've had to answer so far, well, city council is how it's said. It's not cities council. It easily could be, but it's not how it is in the culture. It's treated as a single institution. And that brings up a weird thing because what if you were talking about three city councils? I know how it is for attorney general because that's a funny case, and I think it's just a case by case basis at this point. But yeah, let me just put out how they put. I've seen this written: attorneys general. In other words, not attorney generals, but attorneys general. Isn't that funny? I mean, I see it. I mean, I presume that it's correct, but uh, the point is that it's not something that accords to our basic instincts as English natives or people with any kind of American English exposure. Okay, it's not normal. It's a rare case, but yeah. So how would you even say? Would you say cities council? I don't think so. I think you say city councils plural, but my point is that things that are that rare, you just Google. Things that are not rare, like a city council, then everybody should know that by the back of their heads. Back of their heads. So it's not like we actually stare at the back of our hand a lot, but it's still get. I guess in this area you wouldn't, but if I was holding a hammer and I was using it, I'd be staring at the back of my hand quite a bit because my hand is around a handle. So I think it's just something that is an issue in a different area because when we're typing, we're not staring at the backs of our hands, we're staring at the screen. So anyway, uh, but things like I'm just randomly picking. The boy notebook is on the table. So the boys, BOY apostrophe S. That sort of thing, easy. Birds' wings are strong enough. Birds, and that would be a bird in general. It doesn't. I have to click on a different thing to make it actually be able to go to a second line. So these are the crude tools I am working with, but the craftsman should not curse his tools, but they do all the time because they know the difference between good tools and bad tools. My father did a lot of craftsman work. My late father, but anyway, point is that he knew the difference between a bad tool and a good tool, and through him, I learned a lot about that value. So, having gone through that, let's see if I can find the thing that I was looking at earlier. Oh yeah, I actually made a video about one thing with the yeah, the Paul Pelosi attack, uh, which is in the news right now, and people were saying that they were misled by the police report, the police news conference saying that the intruder and Paul Pelosi, husband of Nancy Pelosi, were each holding a hammer, but they were talking about the same hammer. So it's hammer here, hammer here. No, no, no. It was the same hammer, and they were like, that's terrible. But that's what they claim. That's what the police are claiming. So yeah. So the point is that is the one that was being fought over. English natives can't tell when you put it like that. It's not a problem with English versus foreign. It's the English is not specific enough. It's an example of why you need to be specific or you're actively misleading people, whether you choose to or not. And sometimes people do. Sometimes people absolutely make things less specific on purpose in order to mislead. And that's something that is, I want people to understand the language so they can make their own choices about things with the maximum knowledge available. And in politics, anything even remotely related, the art of telling half truths or three-quarter truths and leaving out important details, it's it's a lot. So let me try to find. That's what I did see, but I may have to find it again in a different place. Hmm. I'm just trying to find a good. Okay, this is an ongoing news story, and I saw people talking about it from different angles. But you may have heard of this group calling itself Just Stop Oil, and they're defacing art in various places. New fad of climate activism. And I don't know why my phone is. I've got to find out how to turn those notifications off when I'm streaming. But I really have not done this very much. So, so I'm going to read through this and just use it as an example. See, like that. I'd have to completely redo a video if it was a video. Okay, so like I said, I am going to try and use examples, and then we'll see. I'm just trying to see if, like, I see where that window's supposed to go, but I don't think you see it. Okay, so why throwing mashed potatoes at Monet can help save the planet. And I think that's how you pronounce it. Here's the thing, I was educated in French through almost all my subjects in school until I was out of high school. But I was still raised in the home as an English native. So pronunciation, I try to get it right. It gives an interesting perspective, but I'm very much into English. So here we go. Generating headlines, which these activists are doing in spades, is critical for advancing climate mitigation policies. See, what I read was from a different angle, people suggesting that they're not going to convert anybody if they're actually doing things like, pouring milk out onto store floors and inconveniencing and harming the people in the immediate vicinity. Why would they care? Their audience is worldwide. Anybody that they lose in the vicinity is limited to what? 100 people at most? They're trying to change the hearts of thousands, millions. It was an argument that I didn't think made much sense. So here we have rather the more mainstream view. Okay, I thought I was going to read a news article. It seems this is a pure opinion piece. That's not what I really want. Okay, this is the one. Okay, this is the one that was pointed to earlier. I'll just try and pause the silly video. Okay. From cake smeared over the Mona Lisa to soup splashed over sunflowers, recent climate protests at art galleries have grabbed international headlines, but also raised questions about the effectiveness of these high profile guerrilla tactics. Yeah, so I'm not a news reader, and that's not the point. Let's stop for just a second. Guerrilla tactics. So they're comparing this to guerrilla warfare in actual warfare, where if there's a tank rolling in the street, you don't go in front of the tank and say hi. You go around the back and shoot it with a rocket or something like that, and then you run away because you expect people to actually try and get rid of you. So they're comparing this to infantry fighting tanks, basically, or you know David versus Goliath. They're trying to use it as the small against the powerful and asymmetrical warfare, taking low cost attacks and hitting high value targets. It's just these high value targets are priceless cultural pieces of art. Vermeer's girl with a girl with a pearl or see, this is what I mean. Especially a guy with pine allergies. I can't get things right the first time often. Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring was the latest painting to fall victim to art-based activism. and they have a hyperlink here. Art based. I don't like the term, and I'll tell you why. It's because that I it's not based on art. Based on art would be you write songs about changing the planet, about saving the planet, about fighting oil, blah blah blah. This isn't art based, it's art centric, as in the art is in the process. So anyway, which has seen environmental campaigners target various artworks, almost always with cheap food products, to draw attention to the usage of fossil fuels. And when I said cheap food products, there was a comma there, so I did a stop, and then a moment later, to draw attention to the usage of fossil fuels. You try to group your speaking with the commas. You don't always succeed depending on where the commas are spaced, but if there is a comma there, you try to do that. At least a normal person should be trying. Two men wearing Just Stop Oil t-shirts jumped the rope separating the priceless 1665 Dutch masterpiece from the public at the Moorish Museum in The Hague on Thursday. I had never seen the name before, so uh, I had to look hard. A video posted on Twitter showed one of them pouring a can of a red substance over the other, who then appeared to attempt to glue his head to the glass protected painting. So there was glass. They weren't doing it to the actual painting, but one of them poured blue substances over the other one, and the other one tried to connect his head and adhere it to the glass, separating this is a mess. I mean, so the actions are a mess. I'm not saying the grammar is a mess. I think the grammar is okay, but it's trying to describe a mess. Quote, how do you feel when you see something beautiful and priceless being apparently destroyed before your very eyes, unquote? One of the men, who has yet to be identified, said with his hands stuck to the wall. Quote, that is the same feeling when you see the planet being destroyed, he said later. He said later, he didn't say it immediately after, okay? So we're editing the quotes, okay? Like the other targeted artworks, the painting was not damaged by the stunt, which came a day after a report from the United Nations found that the world is on track to increase greenhouse gas emissions, widely believed to be responsible for human-caused climate change, by 10.6% compared with 2010 levels. The aim of a lot of these actions is to get a platform that thousands or more people are watching so that they can communicate very clear lines that the climate crisis is happening. It's bad, and we all need to wake up. Unquote. Chris Saltmarsh, a climate activist and author of quote, burnt fighting for climate justice, unquote, told NBC News on the telephone Friday. And the I hyphen is a hyphen, it's not a word. I'm just mentioning it because I'm not actually showing it on screen right now. Saltmarsh, who was not connected with the protests, said they had an immediate payoff in terms of successfully gaining media coverage, but he questioned their long-term effectiveness. Okay, so it's saying that he's not directly connected, but he's giving his opinion on the value of the protests. Okay, quote, it's superficially radical and disruptive, but it's not part of a long-term, coherent strategy for building communities and power, unquote, he said. But Colin Sterling, an assistant professor of heritage and museum studies at the University of Amsterdam, said the protests had the potential to remain in the public consciousness for a long time. The Rockby Venus, I may be saying that wrong, slashed multiple times with a butcher's knife by women's rights activist Mary Richardson at the National Gallery in London in 1914, is still discussed today, he said. He said that the image of the ruptured painting by Diego Velázquez was on the cover of books as a moment of iconoclastic protest. And this is what the second article that I saw referencing this one was talking about. Basically, Have you heard of it? I hadn't heard of it. The person who wrote the article hadn't heard of it and had to Google it. Now, maybe it is still discussed today, but obviously in very academic settings. Is that the public consciousness? I don't know if you can say that the people who study art for a living discussing it a century later, is that really the public consciousness? I'm not sure. Especially these days, but it's, stuff like that. Public consciousness. So then it goes on to say the annual United Nations Climate Conference, known as COP27, which this year will be held in Egypt in November, was a kind of galvanizing force across many different dimensions of the climate movement. Sterling said, adding that there was always an uptick in actions around the time of the conference. So it's publicity seeking and you know, gathering attention for a conference. Okay. But the key here is saying different dimensions. Now, taken out of its funky science fiction context, different dimensions. If you said different aspects, then what it would mean is that, like, take this random bottle. Different aspect, but you look at it from a different perspective. They're all the same bottle, but these are different aspects of it. Just a simple Walmart brand ibuprofen. Is that ibuprofen or acetaminophen bottle? Different aspects would be, seeing it from different sides. So you could sort of say dimensions, and I'm not saying it's wrong or anything. It's just that uh, I'm just showing you an alternative that people could use that they were talking about. The appearances specifically. This is still the same activist that's been quoted most of the article, but he said that war in Ukraine, the cost of living, and energy crises had added urgency to the protests. While politicians have taken note of the protests, they have tended to criticize the way they have been carried out. Quote, demonstrating is a great thing and everyone has the right to make a point. But please leave our shared heritage alone. Attacking defenseless works of art is not the right way. Unquote. Guneo Slew, the Dutch culture and media minister, tweeted Thursday. British Foreign Minister James Cleverly was more blunt after activists threw soup on Van Gogh's sunflowers at the National Gallery in London earlier this month. Let's stop giving these attention-seeking adult toddlers the coverage they clearly crave, he said on Twitter. And we call that putting it bluntly. That's very interesting. On Wednesday, the British government passed a public order bill designed to make protests, such as those seen in art galleries and disruptive actions on roads, more difficult for activists who will face harsher sentences if prosecuted. But Saltmarsh said the legislation would be effective. What we've seen from Extinction Rebellion and other climate activist groups is that they're very prepared to go to prison, he said. Having a lot of environmental campaigners in prison is strategically important. It's a way of building support and creating a crisis for the government, unquote. Okay. That's certainly an interesting point of view. Well, anyway, the point of reading this was to focus on the various points. It's not because that I'm going to take a public position here during tutoring about being for or against this protest. But I like art. I'll just put it that way. I like art. But I'm focused on the words because the words are what matter for the understanding of what I've just read, the understanding of the situation at large, where it fits within the world. Because if people mention things like the war in Ukraine, etc., then it fits within the world, and we're supposed to understand that as part of the context when we're reading something, because context is very important. So, what else can I see from the headlines here? Let's just pick something. Well, let's pick the top thing. Supreme Court leads toward ending affirmative action in college admissions. Now, let me just type this out here. Or I'll actually cut and paste it. Just you. That's not gonna help. Let's just make you a lot smaller. Okay. Supreme Court leans toward ending. I just want to pay some attention to it because uh, there are styles of English where you would have towards in a sentence like this, or people would at least, you know, consider it. So the here major American news organization toward no S, and that's fine, completely fine. Leans toward ending affirmative action. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because, I mean, anybody who's a native in North America will understand what's going on here. I would think, I would hope. But somebody learning as a foreign language might need a little bit of explanation. And this is, how do I summarize it really briefly? It's to say taking affirmative action is supposed to be equivalent to taking a positive step rather than a negative step. A negative step to solving racism would be eliminating racial barriers to entry into something. Affirmative action, a positive step, would be actually consciously, with great attention, trying to bring more ethnic racial minorities into business, into government, into things like that. And it's to say that it's action that's above simply taking down the barriers and getting out of the way. It's somehow pushing from behind and making larger numbers happen to address past racism, sexism, all sorts of isms. And that's what it has meant for decades. So when people talk about affirmative action, they're talking about having extra people of racial minorities. But here's the reason that there's a lawsuit: only certain ones. That's why there's a lawsuit. So basically, people are saying that some minorities are more minority than others, and therefore that we have to have different slants for who gets affirmative action and who gets pushed out. So that's why we have a lawsuit to begin with. The court's conservative majority could prohibit consideration of race in admissions, a policy that universities say is essential to ensuring diversity on campus. So, okay, I'm gonna try a cough drop because my voice is not gonna hold up forever if I do this. Conservative Supreme Court cases on Monday indicated they are willing to end the explicit consideration of race in college admissions as they weighed cases challenging affirmative action policies at the University of North Carolina and Harvard University. So, relating to our earlier thing about possessives, this is on the one hand University of North Carolina, on the other hand Harvard University. So it's treating those as separate single cases, uh, single universities. Members of the courts, I'll write this out. Because what do we see here? We see that courts, the court is a single court. So it gets the apostrophe S treatment for a possessive. Members of the court's conservative majority questioned the legal rationale for allowing the practice and probed to what extent universities could enact new race-neutral admissions policies aimed at improving racial diversity. Some justices, however, indicated that they would be willing to allow applicants to discuss their racial identity in some form as part of essays touching upon their experiences, such as examples of overcoming discrimination. This is written as a summary. It's If you're writing it in the middle of the article, it would be unacceptable for the simple reason that you're having a mishmash of things. It has no single, I mean, it has a theme, but it has a contradictory thing. So I can't really stop and explain things. I gotta go down stream. Liberal justices who are in the minority defended the use of race in admissions, citing the importance of diversity on campus and the difficulty of achieving that goal without any consideration of race. Affirmative action introduced to address historic discrimination has been a contentious issue for years, strongly supported by educational institutions and corporate America as vital to fostering diversity, and condemned by conservatives and as antithetical to the notion that racial equality means that all races are treated the same. So, in this context, I'll just put this at contentious issue. And that here is something that is contested. Let's see if I yeah. So like that. A hotly wow, this is going to be difficult. A hotly contested issue. Hotly contested. The Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, heard back-to-back oral arguments in the UNC and Harvard cases, brought by a group called Students for Fair Admissions, led by conservative activist Ed Blum. A ruling is due by the end of June. At various points during the almost 5 hours of oral arguments, and oral arguments simply means they are spoken. They are not purely written. It was speaking in front of the court. Conservative justices expressed hostility to explicit consideration of race in an application. What do you learn from the mere checking of the box? Justice Samuel Alito asked UNC lawyer Ryan Park. But some conservatives seemed more open to at least some recognition of an applicant's race as part of the process. And it seems that whoever posted this article was a little too liberal with the bolding. If checks, if box checking is not allowed, would it be acceptable if Harvard was allowed to take into consideration what an applicant would say in an essay without having to confront discrimination growing up and how he or she did that? Chief Justice John Roberts asked Cameron Norris, the lawyer challenging Harvard's policy. Norris said such expressions of racial identity could be lawfully considered by the university. Now, it's written like a fact, but this is an argument and an opinion. But it's written like fact. Conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a former professor at Notre Dame. I've heard people pronounce it like that, but it wouldn't be Notre Dame. But the problem is, I learned French pronunciation and it's said by Americans. So, whichever. At Notre Dame Law School was among those who seemed sympathetic to the consideration of what she called a student's experiential statement that touched upon race as opposed to the box checking referenced by Alito. Let me try this. So I don't know if this actually has a defined definition or if she just made it up as she went along, but I can see what she wanted it to mean. She wanted it to mean a statement about your own personal life experiences. The questions asked by Roberts and Barrett and similar comments from another conservative, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, indicated to they were looking toward what kind of race-neutral policies aimed at fostering diversity could be considered if the court ends explicit consideration of race. Conservative justices appear skeptical that universities would ever conclude that their diversity targets could be met without considering race, thereby creating a conflict with the Supreme Court's own 2003 ruling that said that affirmative action would no longer be needed after 25 years. Barrett wondered if the 2003 ruling was grossly optimistic in thinking that race might no longer need to be considered after the quarter-century aspirational deadline. What if there's no end? She asked. So I'll stop that here and just. The point here is simply that lots of. Okay, actually, I'll put grossly optimistic. Optimistic, obviously, is that you see things in a positive light, you hope for the best. Grossly optimistic would be you're hoping extremely hard, obviously. You want things to turn out very well, and then when things don't turn out the way that you wanted, you say it was grossly optimistic to have had those views. So there's that. Okay. So I put in a bit of time here, and not the great success I wanted it to be, but that's, like I said, that's how it starts. Gotta start somewhere. So this is going to be all for now, and everybody take care, and I'll stream some English another time later, and we'll see how it works out. Take care.